Hello everyone, this is Rafael Caro from the Institute of Ethnomusicology at Kunstuniversität Graz. I hope that you all find well in these very strange times, and thank you for tuning in for this presentation entitled Visualization of Melodic Motifs for Music Understanding. The goal of this presentation is introduce to you two prototype tools that we have developed for the understanding of melodic motifs in two music cultures, North Indian classical music and Arab-Andalusian music. But before doing that, I would like to present the motivation that lies behind this project so that you can understand better what we aim to achieve with these tools. So these tools are part of a larger project called Musical Bridges that is carried out mostly at the Music Technology Group in the Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona. I'm collaborating with the project from Kunstuniversität Graz, and it is funded by a Reset Caixa grant. The main goal of the project is the development of computational tools for aiding the understanding of alien music cultures. And by alien, we mean music cultures that are different from the music culture in which the listener was raised. This project then threads into music education, but we aim to develop not musicianship, but listenership, as it is defined, for example, by Eliot and Silverman. The characteristics that the tools that we aim to develop in this project should have are the following. These tools should be able to support, and by that we mean they are not independent tools, but they have to be used in a wider educational format and in any sort of educational format, from formal education to informal education, including even autonomous online training. The tools are thought for users with doesn't have to have any music literacy, and by that we mean mostly the skill of reading staff notation. We aim to provide a large number of complete musical examples through these tools, and in order to do that we are drawing on the ComMusic corpora. So ComMusic was a project that was carried out also by the Music Technology Group, and it researched 5 music traditions, and it developed a research corpus for each of these 5 music traditions, including machine readable data. I will present 2 of them later in this presentation. And finally, we hope that the tools developed in the Musical Bridges project are able to bridge the gap that we believe exists between the text and the audio in most of the available material for music learning now available in the market. So the way we hope that the tools helped to bridge this gap is by providing visualizations of selected elements of the music cultures studied, so that we can support the concept of attentive listening, as it is defined, for example, by Campbell. And when possible, these tools should be able to support an interaction during the listening according to this concept of engaged listening. So the state of the art of the project so far is this. We have developed tools for some rhythmic aspects of the music traditions studied, like Tala for the Indian traditions or Banshi for the Chinese Jingju. And we also addressed some melodic concepts and some aspects of something as complex as raga or makam. Shenqian has been also, some aspects of Shenqian are also included in the Banshi tool. And so until now, there was no tool developed for the Arab-Andalusian music. So for the next step, we realized that a very important concept for understanding any of these music traditions are melodic motifs. And some of them have been very well theorized within the traditions. It is the case of centons for Arab-Andalusian music. And that's why we're creating a tool for this particular music tradition with this aim. This is also very well discussed for the Indian traditions and also for Ottoman Turkish Makam music. In the case of Chinese Qingqiu, it's not very well theorized, but it's a concept that is used. So in all of them, it's a very relevant concept. So in this presentation, I'm going to present to you the first prototypes for addressing the concept of melodic motifs that we developed specifically for the North Indian classical music and for the Arab-Andalusian music. All the tools developed in the Musical Bridges project are designed with the characteristics of one particular music tradition in mind. Therefore, having some understanding of this music tradition is important to understand the tool itself. However, in interest of time, I'm going to assume that North Indian classical music is better known by the audience, and I would like to spend some time presenting the characteristics of the Arab-Andalusian music tradition. So, for the creation of the tool for the understanding of melodic motifs in North Indian classical music, I used the North Indian classical music corpus from the ComMusic Corpora. This corpus contains many collections, and for this tool, I used the Saraga collections, mostly because it contains data that are published under Creative Commons and therefore can be shared publicly. These collections, by the way, were created for the development of this Saraga phone app that is still available. From these Saraga collections, I used obviously the Hindustani one, which contains 108 recordings. These collections, besides the recording itself, contain also annotations. Some of these annotations, like the pitch, which is the pitch line of the recording, were computed automatically, but others, like these four here, were created by experts and performers of this music. For example, the tonic, which is the pitch of the sa, the position, the timestamp of all the sama appearing in the recording, the tala sections, that is the timestamp where each tala starts and ends in each recording, and here we have the melodic phrases. I have to say that I was told by the annotators that not all the characteristic phrases for each raga were annotated, and not all the occurrences of one particular phrase were annotated for each recording, but just a representative amount of instances. And each annotation includes the start and end of the occurrence of one particular melodic phrase, and also a label with the sargam of this particular phrase. Sadly, not all the recordings contain all the annotations, and for this tool, from the 108 recordings, only 49 were usable. That means that contain all the annotations. So these annotations are very complete. I only needed to detect the scale by using some pitch histograms and peak picking that were produced by a code developed for Gopala Koduri for the analysis of South Indian classical music. And once I have all this data, I combine them in this tool that was designed using P5.js, which I'm going to present now. To briefly demonstrate the tool, I chose a performance of Rag Todi by Ajoy Chakrabarty. The tool has three main components. Here at the bottom, there is a general navigator that represents the whole duration of the track and also shows the two talas that are performed in this particular recording and the position of all the samas of each tala cycle in the recording. Here in this central panel, you see the swaras of Rag Todi related to this particular recording. And the most important element for the purpose of this tool is this panel at the left-hand side that contains a list of all the characteristic melodic phrases that were annotated for this recording, including the label, which represents the sargam for each of the particular phrase. The concept of the tool is very simple, and the best way to understand it is just by showing it. So as you see, there is this cursor here that moves vertically across swaras to show the melodic movement in a particular time, and it leaves a tail which lets you see the melodic movement in a particular period of time. The standard color of this melodic line is white, but when a characteristic phrase is performed, it changes to red to call your attention. The particular melodic phrase that is performed is highlighted in the panel, showing the sargam that is performed. The tool allows to observe the characteristics of the rendition of this particular characteristic phrase by this particular artist at this particular position. If you want to explore the recording in terms of characteristic phrases, you can select any of those, and all the instances that have been annotated will appear in the navigator. You can click in the navigator, and then you can see the particular rendition of that phrase at that moment. This vertical line indicates an occurrence of sama. So with this tool, you can see that this particular characteristic phrase, gamma dha, contains much more elements than only these three swaras, and that the movement is very characteristic to identify this melodic phrase. As stated previously, the goal of the tool is to help you focus your listening in order to develop the aforementioned listenership for this particular music tradition. Let's move on now to Arab-Andalusian music. But before introducing the tool, let me give you some background on the music itself. Arab-Andalusian music is a tradition that formed in Al-Andalus, which are the Islamic territories of the medieval Iberian Peninsula. When the population of Al-Andalus was expelled from the Iberian Peninsula at the end of the 15th century, the music tradition survived together with the population in the north of Africa, in countries that today are Morocco, Algeria, and Tunis. The key concept of Arab-Andalusian music is the nauba, and the central element of the nauba is the sang'a, which is a sung poem. In fact, a nauba can be understood as a sequence of these poems, or sana'iyya. These poems are performed with some interludes in between that could be of different forms, as you can see here. So the sequence of sung poems are grouped in different movements, can be said, which have in common one particular rhythmic mode or mizan. And these are the 5 traditional rhythmic modes or mizan that are performed in Arab-Andalusian music. Each of these sections can be introduced by one instrumental piece that is called tawshiyya. And the whole nauba itself can also be introduced by instrumental sections like tawshiyya or mshalia. All the poems and interludes performed in a nauba have in common the tabla, or the melodic mode. Traditionally, each nauba had only one tab, but with time, some of the nauba lost part of the material, and the remainings of those naubat were included to other naubas that were more complete. So nowadays, some naubat can have one or several tubua, which is the plural of tab. The performance of a whole nauba can last for 6 or 8 hours even. So what is done nowadays is performing just one particular movement or section of the nauba, the one coinciding with one rhythmic mode. Therefore, the name of a performance is known by the name of the mizan, followed by the name of the tabla. In the Musical Bridges project, we focus on the Moroccan tradition of Arab-Andalusian music, known as Al-Ala. Amin Chachu, a musician and researcher of this tradition, and who is building a theory for this music, claims that Arab-Andalusian music was built upon the music traditions existing in the Iberian Peninsula in the Middle Ages, and therefore it shares more characteristics with these music traditions than with the Arab musics from the Eastern Mediterranean. An example is that Arab-Andalusian music is diatonic. It has no micro-intervals that are so characteristics in this music from the Eastern Mediterranean. In his description of the tab, or the melodic mode, Amin Chachu hence borrows the concept of centonization that was developed for explaining how plain chant melodies are built using characteristic melodic chunks, so to say. So in one of its latest formulation of its theory, the one published in 2016, I know there is a newest one, but it's published only in Arabic, so I have no access to it. Amin Chachu defines a tab as having one particular scale and range, one particular fundamental degree, principal degrees, and a persistent degrees, and also a series of centons. So this is why Arab-Andalusian music is so useful for this goal of developing tools to helping understand melodic motifs in one particular music tradition. So for the development of the tool for Arab-Andalusian music, we use the Arab-Andalusian Music Corpus from the ComMusic Corpora, which is totally public under a Creative Commons license in this link here. This corpus contains 3 collections: audio recordings, music scores in Music XML, and lyrics collection. But it has no annotations. So the annotations used for the tool were done by myself. I selected one particular sam'a for one recording. I segmented manually the lines of the poem in the recording. I annotated the beats. Then I extracted the sentence using lists of sentence in its theory, using Music21 automatically from the score, and having this signal in the score, I search for them in the recording. Finally, I use the lyrics, and when possible, I use a translation, so far only into Spanish. I used all this information again in a tool developed using P5.js, and this is the one I'm going to demonstrate right now. In this tool, you can see some common similarities with the tool for North Indian classical music. In this case, this is a Fama from Qudam al-Maya. As you remember, Qudam is the mizan, the rhythmic mode, and al-Maya is the taba, the melodic mode. Here at the bottom, you have the general navigator, and here you have the centons analyzed for this particular recording. But since this is a sung poem, the lyrics have a much bigger importance here, and you can read them in this Spanish translation or in its original Arabic. In the navigator, each of these boxes represent one of these lines. And in this central panel is the current line that is performed highlighted. And you can see the pitch, a track of this particular line, and the centons that are performed in this particular line in the corresponding color. These centons can also be seen in the navigator, again with the same corresponding colors, and you can choose how many of them you want to see. In this central navigator, for the specific line, you can choose to see the scale that is performed, and also which is the fundamental degree, the principal degrees, and the persistent degrees. Also, you can see the beats of the particular mizan that is performed, and these vertical thin lines represent the tak, and these thick lines represent the dum, the two strokes that form the characteristic rhythms of the mizan in Arab-Andalusian music. So if we play the music, maybe you notice that every time that a particular centon is being performed, it is highlighted here so you know which one is performed. Let's listen to the following line, which is a repetition of the previous one. You can click anytime in the navigator or in the navigator line to move the cursor to the particular moment that you are interested in. Due to time limitations, only some of the functionalities of the tools have been presented here. However, the tools and the code and the data are all available publicly through these links. You can go there and explore the tools at your own pace and convenience. They are well described with instructions of how to use all the functionalities. In the process of developing the tools, we have faced some technical challenges. Just to give you one example, you might have noticed that the pitch tracks were not as accurate as desirable. One possible explanation for this might be that the algorithms for automatic extraction of pitch tracks were not designed with these music traditions in mind. And then when applied to this, the results are not as optimal as expected. Finally, we are still thinking of ways for effectively evaluating that these tools fulfill the goals for which they were created, which is aiding in the understanding of alien music traditions. So this is all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to hearing your feedback for this or other tools from the Musical Bridges project, and stay healthy.